It was a March afternoon like so many others, until my world collapsed in a matter of minutes. I, Irina Lebedeva, 4 months pregnant with our first child, was back from the medical appointment with photos of tight ultrasound in her hands. The smile on his face went out when I opened the door of our apartment in a quiet neighborhood of Ekaterinburg. There they were, my husband, Denis Vorobyov, his mother, Ludmila Ivanovna, and her sister, Svetlana Petrovna, with glances that froze the soul. The heavy air in the room was almost palpable. "Denis, what's going on?" I asked, trying to stay calm while leaving the bag on the table. It was then that Ludmila, with a hatred I never imagined possible, pointed her bone finger toward me. "Don't pretend to be innocent, you hypocritical. I saw you last week at Lenin Avenue Cafe, laughing and holding hands with another man. This son you carry is not my son. She has been betraying him for months." My heart stopped. "This is a lie. Denis, you can't believe it," I begged, but your eyes were already full of distrust and disgust. "My mother wouldn't lie," he replied cold. "She never had reason to invent something like that." Reason? She hated me from the first day, never accepted our marriage. Before I could argue, Svetlana launched on me like a beast. Kicks in the stomach, scams on the legs. I cringed, trying to protect my baby, but she didn't stop. He took an iron bar left near the door after the renovation and began to beat me without mercy. I looked at Denis, waiting for him to defend me. Instead, he just watched behind his mother, encouraging, still little. "It gives more." The pain was unbearable, the blood dripped over the face, and I just thought, they will kill me. Until a voice outside shouted, calling the police. A neighbor must have heard my screams. Minutes later, the sirens echoed through the building. When the ambulance arrived, I could barely move. The doctors tried to contact my parents, but my mother on the phone was relentless. "We have no daughter." Those who had already abandoned me years ago, when I married their will, now seal my destiny with a sentence. It was right now, lying on the stretcher, abandoned by all, that something inside me became. It was not weakness. It was a cold and relentless determination. I would destroy each one of them. And that's what I did. First, I document everything, every bruise, every broken bone, every word of the doctors. Svetlana was arrested by willful body injury. Ludmila, as an instigator. Denis was not criminally indicted, but I assured that his nightmare was just beginning. I hired Anna Sergeyevna Sinitsina, a lawyer known for crushing cases of domestic violence. "What they did to you is monstrous," she said on our first date. "Let's make them pay for every drop of blood." The civil proceedings against Svetlana was devastating. The tests were irrefutable, medical reports, testimonials from the neighbor, photos of my injuries, 3 broken ribs, concussion, marks all over the body. She tried to claim self-defense, but her lies collapsed under Anna's relentless interrogation. "So you think a 4-month-old pregnant woman was a threat to 2 healthy adults?" asked my lawyer, with a sarcasm that cut as a blade. The judge, an older woman, paled to seeing the images of what that beast did to a pregnant woman. I depused calmly, without drama. I didn't need to overdo it. The truth, naked and raw, was sufficient. And as they tried to justify themselves, I already planned the next step. Because revenge would not be quick. It would be meticulous, cool, and devastating. And I wouldn't stop until one of them knees. The truth, when revealed, reached it. As I described how I looked at my husband and he, instead of protecting myself, urged the violence against me with a sadistic smile, the voice of the judge trembled. "Titi." The testimonials of Svetlana were a disaster. She seemed cold, distanced, as if she did not understand the severity of what she had done. When they asked if they regret it, he answered with a cold challenge, "I protected my sister." The verdict was unanimous in my favor. 1.5 million rubles in compensation. Svetlana collapsed in tears, finally understanding the weight of the consequences. As a head of accounting at Vorgarant, she didn't have that money. The judicial enforcement forced her to sell the apartment, to empty the economies, to sink into debt. But for me, that was little. I wanted more than your financial ruin. I wanted your total annihilation. I hired Petar Sergeyevich Lapshin, a private, ex-operative detective with deep connections. "I will find everything necessary," he said. "People capable of beating a pregnant woman often hide too much rot." And Petar was right. What he dug up destroyed Svetlana once and for all. We found that for 2 years she stole the employer himself. The scheme was sophisticated. I identified inactive insurance policies, those without movement for over a year, and diverted administrative fees to an open ghost account on behalf of an orange company. Thus, she diverted more than 2 million rubles. Svetlana was a ludopath, and her family didn't even suspect. Every weekend, she lost tens of thousands of rubles on betting sites, while loan debts grew like an avalanche. "People sunk in debt often discharge anger at others," said Petar. It was the explanation for its pathological aggressiveness. I sent the documents anonymously and professionally to the corporate security of the guarantee. Irrefutable evidence, bank extracts, transaction tracking, all meticulously organized. The reaction was immediate. They blocked their access to the systems, opened an internal investigation and called the police. On the morning of a Thursday, she was handcuffed in the middle of the office, dragged like a common criminal in front of shocked colleagues. The Ekaterinburg online portal published the news: million deviation scheme is discovered in a regional insurance company. Until dusk, Svetlana's photo in handcuffs went viral in the Telegram channels. In the neighborhood groups, they discussed their case with disgust, linking him directly to the attack on Mie pregnant, beaten by whom he should protect her. It was fired on time, convicted of misappropriation and sentenced to 3 years in a general regime penal colony. Your career, destroyed. Its reputation, reduced to rubble. All the money you stole, lost. But I wasn't over yet. While Svetlana was waiting for the trial, I found that she had 2 adult children, Stepan and Alexandra, who lived in other regions. Both had been away for years because of their toxic behavior, but had minimal contact. I found them on social networks. Not to hurt them, but to know the truth about their mother. I sent them copies of the case file, photos of my injuries, medical reports, irrefutable proofs that her actions could have killed me and my daughter. Stepan, the eldest, was in shock. He responded immediately, apologizing, explaining that he had cut ties with his mother years earlier because of her aggressiveness and sickly irresponsibility. "I'm sorry for what happened to you," he wrote. "For years I feared that she ended up hurting someone seriously. My wife and I didn't even leave her close to our children. There have been similar incidents. I hope you and the baby are fine." Alexandra reacted differently but equally revealing. He was not surprised by his mother's act, but he was furious. Svetlana, once again, had embarrassed the family. Alexandra was a teacher of elementary school and feared that her mother's criminal conviction would stain her reputation. Both definitely broke with Svetlana in knowing the extent of their crimes. When, a year and a half later, the verdict was read, neither attended. She was alone in the defendants, finally understanding that her choices cost her not only freedom and money, but also the family. The 3 years in the colony was hell. Petar kept me informed. Svetlana did not adapt to the regime, fighting with the detainees of which they despised her for beating a pregnant woman. It came out conditionally after 2.5 years, but the world that received it was no longer the same. The house, sold to pay debts. The children, who repudiated her. The friends, who abandoned her. A former company, with no future, with no hope of rebuilding what he has lost. Getting work was almost impossible. His last job, according to Petar, was to wash floors in a mall at dawn, sleeping in a hostel for some coins. The woman who thought she had the right to destroy a life was now weak, alone, paying every day for what she did. This justice, not that of the courts, but that of fate, I brought a satisfaction that no money could buy. But Svetlana was just the first name on the list. The next 2 years were dedicated to hunting each of the traitors. Ludmila Ivanovna was next. The accusation of instigation earned him a suspended sentence and community work. But I didn't just trust criminal courts. I filed a lawsuit for defamation, moral damage and offense to honor from the millions of rubles. My lawyer requested history of calls, messages on social networks, bank statements. What we discovered shocked even the experienced Anna Sergeyevna. Ludmilla had planned my lynching for months. He followed me, photographed, hired a fellow to make evidence against me. That cafeteria lover? Maxim, a distant relative of her. He paid for him to pose it for an assembled photo, edited at Photoshop to simulate a betrayal. But Maxim's consciousness couldn't stand it. He himself came to me, delivering prints of the conversation on Telegram where Ludmilla detailed, step by step, how to destroy my marriage. With these evidence, the court granted the full compensation of the millions. Ludmilla was forced to sell the apartment in the center, move to distant relatives inside. But I didn't stop there. 15 years ago, she was head of accounting at a municipal institution, proud of her position, her status, her connections. I used the case file to send a formal complaint to your head, questioning your moral suitability to the position. The municipality, not wanting to associate its name with a violence organizer against a pregnant woman, fired her for mutual agreement. At 62, Ludmilla was out of job, no money, no perspectives. With his devastated reputation and his age, finding work was impossible. The last news I had. He lives in the house of a third cousin in Chelyabinsk, for the first time in his life dependent on the charity of others. Now it was the turn of Dennis, the man who swore to love and protect, but instead incited his own family to beat me pregnant. His betrayal hurt more than any punches. We dreamed together, we planned a future. I trusted him without reservation. Discovering his true nature required revenge to height. Divorce. And me. I turned your divorce into a public execution. Anna Sergeyevna proved that Dennis not only failed to protect his wife and son to be born, he incited the violence, applauding each blow as I blew on the floor. 5 months after Anya's birth, I required the DNA test. He resisted, of course, feeding the hope that doubts about paternity would save him from responsibility. But Anna Sergeyevna was relentless. Cooperation can now mitigate the consequences later. The result? 99.99% probability. When the verdict was read aloud in the court, Dennis cringed in the chair like an insert. To the light. His own mother had convinced him to abandon his family based on manufactured lies. And now, everyone knew. Your Excellency, Anna Sergeyevna turned to the judge with a calm that would jerk the room. Here is a man who not only believed in monstrous slander without any verification, but stimulated aggression against a pregnant woman. DNA's expertise proves, Mr. Vorobyov abandoned his daughter on false accusations, forged by his own family. Roman Mission, Dennis's lawyer, one of those slippery types that specialize in lost causes, tried to paint his client as a victim of maternal manipulations. The argument turned against him when Anna Sergeyevna presented the recordings of our sessions with the family psychologist. Legal recordings, made with the consent of the professional. In them, Dennis admitted, among tears of self-dish, that his mother interfered with marriage, but was too weak to face her. The psychologist had warned, your inability to set limits with her will destroy her family. That is, Anna Sergeyevna crossed her arms, fixing him with a piercing look. Did you know the problem? Received professional guidance and still hearing the accusations, chose to believe it instantly? Without hesitation. Without question. Because the mother's lie offered him what he always wanted, an excuse to escape. The Russian family code is clear, ill treatment directly influenced the division of goods. I took the house. I took the car. It took 60% of the joint actives, as well as a fixed pension of 30,000 monthly rubles to Anya, not to mention the compensation for moral damages. But the money was just the beginning. In 7 years of marriage, I learned all about Dennis. He valued 2 things above all, his professional reputation and the image of good boy. I destroyed both. Metodicamente. He had been working for 7 years at Gradproект, one of Ekaterinburg's most respected designers. Colleagues admired him. The position of division leader was just a matter of time. Until I called Anastasia Franlova, a journalist at the Moe Ekaterinburg portal, specializing in domestic violence and social hypocrisy. I have a story that will interest you, he said on the phone. About a model engineer who incited the family to beat the pregnant wife. About how the system protects Thai aggressors. Anastasia did not need more than that. Stories of seemingly respectable men who hide monsters were their specialty. We met in a discreet cafeteria. I delivered copies of the police reports, medical reports, photos of my injuries, transcripts of the recordings. She flipped the documents, her face becoming more pale. "That's a nightmare," he murmured. "Has he actually ordered them to hit you stronger?" "Exactly that. And don't stop there. Her mother forged tests of betrayal, hired a cousin to take fake photos, orchestrated everything." Dennis did not doubt for a second. 2 weeks later, the material was published on Sunday, with headline on the main page, "Ekaterinburg engineer urges family to assault pregnant wife." Beside, photos of Dennis smiling on the corporate site, the imposing facade of Gradprojekt, and, in brutal contrast, images of my bruises, treated to highlight every detail. The matter spread like fire in straw. Colleagues, friends, professional contacts shared, commented, horrified. "Unbelievable that such a polite guy can be able to do so," wrote a former colleague. "It changes everything," said another. Gradprojekt's direction panicked. The company sold itself as a bastion of family values and social responsibility. Having one of his star-starred engineers was a public relations disaster. On Monday morning, Dennis was called to HR temporary suspension during internal investigation, they said. Everyone knew what that means. It was. I made sure the investigation found more than just the case of violence. Through Piotr Sergievich, a contact within the company, it was found that Dennis used corporate resources for parallel work, the 3D printer and SAPR licenses, to enrich at the expense of the company. It was not a crime, but seriously violated the code of conduct. With the evidence of the judicial process and the records of irregularities, the verdict was quick: dismissal by mutual agreement. In the official letter, which I have seen from reliable sources, mentioned both the incident of domestic violence and misuse of corporate property. "Any employee who contradicts the company's safety and integrity values has no place here," read the document. Dennis tried to appeal, claiming discrimination, but his labor lawyer soon realized the futility. The tests were irrefutable. The advice: accept a ridiculous compensation and disappear. The engineering world in Ekaterinburg is small. There is no official blacklist, but mouth-to-mouth is relentless. Its history ran into professional groups on Telegram, and no decent company wanted to associate its name with the scandal. In the end, he got a job as a mechanical turner in a factory, gaining a third of what he received before. But professional degradation was only part of the plan. Dennis has always lived for the approval of others. So I took care of your circle to know of the truth. I created a detailed post on Kontakt, photos of the injuries, reports, judicial documents, excerpts from recordings where he shouted "Beat stronger." The post went viral in local groups. Dennis became an outcast. He has always been the soul of the parties. He organized barbecues on weekends, played in the neighborhood soccer league, was the cool face that everyone invited. His friends had no idea what he was able. I started with Ilya Makiev, friend of Republic and godfather of our marriage. "Irina, I can't believe it," he wrote on Telegram after my message. "He is sure. It looks like a misunderstanding. Dennis is not like that." I sent the tests, protocols, photos, the recording where he encourages violence, the DNA result proving that Anya was her daughter despite her mother's lies. Ilya answered 3 hours later. "I don't know what to say. I'm disgusted. I never imagined that he was capable of this. I am really sorry." In a week, the news spread to all college friends. The group Our Republic, active for over 10 years, silenced when Dennis tried to write. "Nobody. Your invitation to traditional fishing on the lake." Silence. On the birthday of the 20 guests, only 2 appeared and left in less than an hour. The co-workers were even more brutal. Boris Klimov, his best friend in the urban project, said publicly, "I have wife and daughter. The idea that a man I trusted could encourage a pregnant woman to be beaten with an iron bar turns my stomach. I don't want to know about Denis Vorobyov. He tried to justify himself. My mother manipulated me, I regret it." But excuses did not serve. People do not forgive those who applauded violence against a pregnant woman. No request for forgiveness seemed enough to so much treason. Even his family went into shock. Your uncle Alexander called me personally. What Dennis has done is unforgivable. I've known this boy since she was born. I've never imagined that she was able to. You and the little girl deserve much more. In the city, Dennis was recognized by publications. Not everywhere, but enough for discomfort to be constant. Supermarket boxes whispered to see him. Waitresses face him cold. Parents moved the children from the park when he passed. The loneliness was overwhelming, relentless. Dennis had built his identity about the love and respect of others, and ask for a peace, destroyed both. There was no escape. The few who still spoke to him. It had become bitter, depressed, full of hatred. Guilt all to me, for destroying your life. The mother, by the lie. Friends, for the betrayal. Society, for not forgiving. But Dennis never understood the obvious. It was all the work of his own hands. He chose to believe his mother's lies without question. He chose to expel a pregnant woman from home. He chose to stand still, encouraging violence against his wife carrying his daughter. Each consequence was the direct result of these choices. The financial pressure was the final blow. Pension, court costs, reduced salary. Dennis could barely pay the bills. He exchanged our apartment with a decaying conjugate on the periphery, sold the SUV and bought a sedan used with 200,000 kilometers on the odometer. Ludmila Ivanovna, whose lie lit all that fire, couldn't help him neither with money nor with support. The family that once came together in hatred of me was now fragmented, sinking into the ruins itself. And the best part? Dennis would have to carry this burden for the rest of his life. Any search for your name on Google showed first reports on domestic violence. Every curriculum, every new contact, every attempt at social reintegration would be poisoned by its past. He exchanged a wife who loved him, a perfect daughter, a promising career and an untouchable reputation for a minute of cowardice and cruelty. A man who had everything became a living warning, the price of weakness of character and blind loyalty to those who do not deserve. But I wasn't over yet. My parents, Sergei and Galina Lebeda, turned my back on the darkest moment of my life. They deserved a punishment. My father, pillar of the parish, headed the pastoral council. My mother led the female organization of the church. They spent their lives concerned only with appearances, with what others would think. That's why they went out of the family when I married their will. Using my single name, I created anonymous accounts and started sharing our story. Orthodox parents who abandoned their pregnant daughter and granddaughter in danger. I attached messages, calls, letters, all the attempts I have done over the years to reconnect. Their answer? Always the same cold silence. I wrote the text to achieve precisely the values that cared so much in the eyes of the religious community. The title? Orthodox parents abandon pregnant daughter beaten by her husband. I posted in parish groups, local forums, and social networks of the faithful. The reaction was instantaneous. The parishioners were terrified. How could the board leader reject his own daughter and granddaughter? The female organization voted for my mother's immediate removal. My parents became outcast among the same people for whom for years they built a facade of righteousness. But I didn't stop there. My father had a small accounting firm whose clients were mostly church co-religious entrepreneurs known to the parish. When the story of the abandoned daughter spread, they began to cancel the contracts. In 6 months, he lost more than half of the clientele. Financial stress, added to social ostracism, eroded his marriage. They had erected their identities about the respect of others, and I methodically reduced everything to rubble. My mother had a nervous collapse. It was hospitalized. My father, in the face of the bankruptcy of the business and the sick wife, tried to contact through intermediaries. I begged forgiveness, asked me to call the dogs back. Too late. All this time, I created Anya alone. A beautiful, healthy girl, her father's face, which made his betrayal even bitter. But she gave me a purpose, a reason to keep fighting. A year after that nightmare Tuesday, I was in Anya's room, watching my daughter sleep. Each traitor reaped what he planted. Svetlana, in prison, ruined and unemployed. Ludmila Ivanovna, exiled, dependent on charity of distant relatives. Dennis, in underemployment, an outcast that can barely sustain himself. My parents, without status, with bruising and marriage crumbling. Someone will say that I went too far, that revenge consumed me. I disagree. I didn't start this war. I returned home with the ultrasound exam, eager to share joy with my husband. They attacked. They betrayed. They abandoned me when I was more vulnerable. What I did was not revenge. It was justice. I used the law, I spoke the truth, let the natural consequences follow your course. I didn't make evidence, I didn't lie. I just made sure the world knew who they were really. The most revealing moment came 8 months after Anya's birth. In the grocery store near home, I bumped into Dennis. It was unrecognizable, thin, aged, broken. He approached hesitantly, his eyes fixed on his daughter, full of late regret. "She's perfect," he murmured. "Yes. And it's mine," I said, dry. "You made your choice that day, Dennis. Now lives with her." He stayed there, like crying, but turned his back and gone. We have never seen each other except at the pension hearings. Sometimes they ask me if I feel blame for what happened to their lives. I don't feel. They made choices that revealed their essence. I just guaranteed that this essence was known and judged as I deserved. I didn't choose this path for them. They chose. My only regret. The 3 years I wasted trusting who did not deserve. But even that had its value. I learned to see beyond the masks. Anya will grow up knowing that her mother does not tolerate betrayal, which gives change to those who hurt her, who never bow. You will understand that family is not only blood and that sometimes the deepest pain comes from who should love. Above all, you will learn that being a victim is a temporary condition. Surviving is a choice. And win. This is a decision. I chose more than survive. I chose to return the blow. And I won. And it was not any triumph, it was annihilation. Methodical. Irreversible. The only difference between them and me. They deserved each comma of this end. And I don't feel remorse. Not even a drop. If you have come here, thank you for listening to this story that is not for the fragile. It is for those who understand that sometimes justice does not use toga, use claws. Now, I want to know from you, where does this voice come from that just heard me? How long have you been following these truths that dare to say aloud? And, more importantly, what story do you want me to dig up next time? Which collective wound deserves to be exposed? Which lie needs to be crushed under the weight of truth? Each suggestion will be read. Each desire, considered. Because here there is no room for half words, just for well-calculated revides and stories that leave mark. Speak. I hear. And, if necessary, a Joe.